It is a new day on Press Hour. Welcome to the program. What happens in the United States of America affects the rest of the world. The inauguration ceremony of the U.S. President-elect Joe Biden is on January 20 and takes place within a context that questions the democratic maturity of the world's biggest democracy. It is like gold is rusting. We shall look at the lessons from the current disturbing American experience. We are also going to look at climate change, any hope, any new hope for international cooperation, given also that America, the new administration, is taking a different direction in favor of climate change, fighting against climate change. You see, those are the two topics. They are related. We are going to discuss them here, and we have a full house already. We have Dr. Augustine Njamshi, who is an environmental expert. Welcome to the program, Doctor.
Thank you.
Yes, we have next to you Elias Ngalame, is the publisher, Echo Outlook newspaper. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kila.
Yes, next to me here, Eugene Fongwa, media and development analyst. Eugene, welcome to your house.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, we have Paul Yumbo. Paul Yumbo is an international relations researcher. He has been here severally, and you will like him today like you did before. Those are the people who are going to handle these topics on today's edition of Press Hour. We just want you to stay where you are, and we'll set the program rolling with the first item, that is the pace setter, which is Press Review with Emanuela Danley.
Preparations ahead of the African Nations Championship that opened in Cameroon Saturday got the press busy the week ending. Cameroon Tribune publishes the list of the 23 intermediate lions to take part in the competition before presenting Cameroon as ready for the CHAN. To the lone English daily, The Guardian Post, Anglophone sidelines from Lions CHAN's court as the Lions embark on uncertain expedition. Then government ignores fight between Cameroon Professional Football League and Fecafoot and focuses on CHAN organization on the Post newspaper. Just when Northwest Regional Football League kicks off, with Kumbo Strikers FC begging on elites to support the team on the horizon. The Sun simply sees insecurity COVID-19 stare at CHAN. Bloody weekend in Northwest and Southwest is reported on The Guardian Post as military raid in Moyoka leaves women and children dead. To the Post, men in military attire kill 9, injure many in Mwatu, Moyoka, even as the army says terrorists, not women and children, were killed in the military raid in Mwatu, Moyoka on the median. Then Defense Minister says army killed in self-defense in Moyoka raid on the horizon. This happening not long after religious leaders dictate end of Anglophone crisis in 2021 on the Star as pressure mounts on France to table Anglophone crisis at UN Security Council on the Guardian Post. Then the Minister of Defense is expected at Yaoundé Military Tribunal next week in line with the Garbu massacre on Newswatch. The Voice newspaper wants the war to end now as unfortunate escalation of violence continue. Then refugees, IDPs of the Southwest say President Paul Biya for assisting them on the Crown newspaper just when Minad Boss takes Biya's relief to Chinese refugees fleeing violence in the Central African Republic on the Guardian Post. To Echo Outlook, Minister Atangaji consoles refugees in East Region. Then Finance Minister rolls out priorities for 2021 state budget on Echo Outlook. The same priorities are outlined on the Post Weekender before Motaze announces tax exemption for agri-fishing inputs on the horizon. The major national dialogue, 15 months after analysis and impact, writes municipal updates. the construction of Kumbo-Nkambe Road to go up 300 billion CFA funds, the election of Ndi Eugene as Kamasej Yaoundé president, the annulment of taxes on made-in-Cameroon cosmetics, the dismantling of a notorious child trafficking network in Yaoundé by gendarmes, and the failure of government to address Cameco's main problems again form stories carried by the papers this week. Let's now end our press review with the story on Cameroon Tribune, where the 143 minutes Cameroonian drama The Fisherman's Diary of Enna John Scott has been accepted for the Best International Feature category at the Academic Awards, Oscars, one of the prestigious cinema platforms in the world. The film's entry was accepted during the week, a sign that Cameroonian films meet international standards. The film, if eventually nominated by the Oscars team, Cameroon can then nurse hopes of it winning the Oscars award. Until I come your way again, this is your Hour with the Press.
Our way again, that will be next week, Emanuela. Thank you very much. And we welcome you back, ladies and gentlemen, to this set. We're going to immediately start the first topic, democracy lessons from America. That's the question we are asking. We know what happened on the 6th of January, where it has been officially described in America as an insurrection from a sitting president, a current incumbent president, who should be giving way on the 20th. That's, I think that should be Wednesday, to the president-elect Joe Biden. And there is a problem that the insurrection that shocked the world. We want to begin with you, Paul Yumbo, international relations researcher. What actually shocked the world in the American experience that we're talking about?
Well, just 30 years ago, there was a major debate in the academic, political, and philosophical circles that was focusing around the idea that history is over. Why were people saying that history was over? Because after the Cold War, there seemed to be a model, a universal model of democracy, pluralist society, open society, towards which all the countries of the world were moving towards. And the idea that there would be major conflicts between democratic countries and within democratic countries seemed to be far-fetched. Now in 2021, we have the proof that even in the citadel of democracy, as certain call it, America, there still are resistances to the very ideals and the very principles of democratic practice. And that is what shocked the world. It happened in such a way that necessarily calls for people's attention. People dying in America because a sitting president is contesting the results of an election.
Eugene, that is what shocked the world globally. You can go into the event and maybe tell us also what shocked you.
I think the shocking thing was the idea that even in those circumstances that have been aptly described, politics and this search for political capital still trumps good sense, and that even in today's America, there are politicians who are willing to stake the very foundation on which the American society is built in exchange for political capital. The behavior, particularly of the Republican lawmakers, was essentially a behavior that was intended to secure votes in future elections. And that begins to tell us to what extent the quest for votes can drift a system where the core values upon which people proclaim their political ambitions can be set aside if it means that they would not come back to office. And so we increasingly see some element of greed, being able to capture power at all cost, not only for the president who tried to use every means available at his disposal, including calling for an insurrection, as the American media has described it, but also of lawmakers who are willing to give up everything that America stands for.
Yes, and the American
election.
lawmakers, the Congress has also said it's an incitation to insurrection. Dr. Augustine Njamsi, when you watch the 6th of January, events leading up to that 6th of January and what has even been happening afterward, are you also shocked?
I am not really shocked because, you know, way back in 2015, I said my concern is not about Trump. It's about the majority or the silent majority of Americans that follow him or that believe in his ideology and are following him blindly. And that is what has happened. You know, Trump is just a reflection of a certain group or a good number of Americans who believe in what he does. Trump is the picture of such a majority. So that is what is worrying. However, what happened on the 6th of
Exactly, I think you're correct. You're going to continue more than about 70 to 74 million Americans voted for him against about 78 million for Joe Biden. So it's correct that so many Americans actually follow what he's saying.
Exactly.
You were talking about the 6th of January.
Exactly. I mean, you know, for such a person, Trump has never changed his policy, even before coming into office. There is nothing that is new that Trump did.
Okay.
So this was foreseen 4 years before. So if it's happening now, I should not be shocked. Okay? So the worry is that 74 million Americans that still believe in him.
Okay.
And up till now, they still believe in him.
Okay, well, we know some members of his party, highly placed members of his party, are going against him. Some openly, the other day, 10 unprecedented voted for him to be impeached. Yes, Elias Galame, yes, the publisher of Echo Outlook. Yes, how do you react to the current American experience?
Yes, in fact, what actually shocked me in the case of America is the excesses of Trump that culminated in the drama that we saw in Capitol. But the American people have proven that they are aware of, or they have a commitment to reject any vices that they abhor, just as they have the commitment to uphold the values that they cherish. And this is what they did by putting an end to the excesses of Trump.
Yes, and he's still facing prosecution because the impeachment has already been done. He is facing prosecution charges now at the Senate, given that Congress has already impeached him. We're going to come back to you, Paul Yumbo. This true that we are shocked, but in a democracy like that of America, you call it the citadel of democracy in the world, for what we've known up to today, institutions have saved the lives of Americans. Can we say that?
Indeed. Some analysts are, I think, going a bit too far when they're saying that democracy has been destroyed, that America has completely been is in shambles right now from a democratic point of view, because indeed, as you are suggesting, the institutions of America have upheld their values. The Vice President, Mike Pence, Donald Trump's Vice President, certified that Joe Biden has won the elections, and that is a part of the normal institutional functioning of America. The House of Representatives voted for a second time to impeach a president, sitting president, which is a historic first. And now the Attorney General at the Supreme Court and all the institutional actors present in the Senate, including the President of the Senate, that's the Vice President, will be in charge of handling the trial. And now Donald Trump and his attorneys will have to defend himself against the charges of inciting insurrection. And this is a normal functioning of American institutions. It is inscribed in the Constitution. So from that point of view, there is no institutional rupture in what we're seeing right now.
Institutions also, you have something to say about the strong institutions. We usually say when we have them, we will take care of deviant political figures.
Yeah, and one of the things that is emerging is that when it comes to building those institutions, you can't take the risk of leaving it in the hands of one person or a group of persons, because the institutions kick in, irrespective of who is at the point of consideration, and if you take into account the role of the vice president, it's a very strong indication of the levels at which American power is distributed and shared. That it's the vice president that leads that certifies presidential elections and not the president. We begin to see within a system that we thought we understood and knew other elements that have helped to hold that system in place, the distribution of power. You see the case where election officials at state levels refuse to take orders from the president because within that institutional arrangement, the president really can't do anything to them. And so the institutions do not only protect the system, but they also protect the actors of the system. And that's a very, very core element that I think as Africans we can take from that. Institutions, strong institutions, yes, but we don't forget that strong institutions are also led by people, and so the system needs to protect the people who run those institutions.
Yes, I'm coming back to you, Dr. Augustine Njamshi. You were talking about the number of people who are still following President Trump in the United States, giving what many people there and around the world say that he has exaggerated, he has gone across the board. The danger, it has been established by American press, some other press, that the president tells lies and manipulates. What the danger of telling lies and manipulation?
I think the danger of telling lies is high, because when you see half of the population of a country like America follows baseless arguments or conspiracy theory, it affects the whole country. Believe it or not, even if Americans were to come together today, the wounds are so deep that it would take the Biden administration some time to heal the wounds, because they believe in what they believe. It is lies, it is falsehood, but it is there, they believe in it. One of the things you talked about, institutions, I think separation of power is also very important. If you look at the American setup, the Supreme Court is made up of 9 justices, 3 of whom were appointed by Trump himself. But you see what happened. He couldn't sail through because of separation of power. That is very, very important. Secondly, if you look at a president that is an incumbent crying foul that there has been rigged elections, that is unheard of, because most of the time we see where it is the opposition that is crying that they have rigged elections because of the incumbent. But now this is the contrary. That shows strong institutions and separation of powers. And if a president takes up his phone, he's so frustrated that he calls a state secretary to overturn the election results and give it to his favor, and he refuses, and he's still there. That shows strong institutions and separation of power.
I think that's well said, Elias.
Yes. You talked about lies telling a while ago, but the drama about the whole show is that we saw that people still supporting a president who goes with lies telling, who insults people on Twitter. And this only shows how polarized the American society is. And what happened at the Capitol has only come to deepen that polarization.
Yes, Eugene, there's one aspect, before I go back to the expert in the international relations, something that has happened during this American experience, that a whole president whose means of communication is social media, Twitter, that they have taken upon themselves, the providers, to block him from using. How do we interpret this type of move?
No, I think that's an indication of something that media scholars have been discussing for a while, the role that social media and the rise of big technology, or big tech as they call it, is going to play in the regulation of society. The idea that most of this technology is in the hands of private individuals who can take corporate decisions to be able to turn off the Twitter feeds from the President of the United States, which is a very risky but also a very significant step they have made. So I think the debate is about how much power can rest in the hands of these tech companies, and whether that is good for society as a whole, or that there is need to now begin to think about regulating the power of these corporations. But that is not the only debate about social media in democratic space we had. Elsewhere, we've seen the debates on the opposite side, the role that governments can have in manipulating and controlling social media for political ends. We've seen governments shut down the social media and exercise control over private entities, calling on providers to turn off signals to certain parts of the population. I think it's going
sometimes the reason they give is that is for security.
Whatever the reasons are, I think the discussion here is not about whether these moves are justified. It's really about how power is handled and how it can be applied to meet ends that are not necessarily with the intention of advancing society.
Okay.
And this moves away from into morals and ethical space.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask Twitter, for example, they would argue, and they have argued, that the work they acted in the interest of society. But who gives them the power to act in the interest of the society? That's the core question that we need to begin to ask.
Okay, thanks.
It's early to have any answers from an academic, analytical perspective. But I think the questions have become more poignant and clearer to us, and call that there's need for a little more interrogations of these issues.
We are certainly going to dig deeper concerning that topic, social media, and how it affects society. In the near future, we hope to do that. We cannot get out of this topic, Paul Yombo, international relations researcher, without making a correlation between what's happening in America and what we are living in Cameroon. How do you, what Cameroon learns from?
Well, that's a very deep question you're raising, and there are many avenues for reflection and research in that specific domain. But let's bring it back to one point that you just raised a couple seconds earlier on the role of institutions in development. I think when you look at how Americans, the relationships that individual American political actors have with America, you understand what is lacking in many African countries, and often with Cameroon. The issue is that the historical narrative on which America is founded is deeply inscribed in individual America's personal identity. Mm-hmm. It means that their allegiance to the flag is more important than their allegiance to ephemeral political ideals or individual political gain. And when you have such a deep enrootment in a national ideal, in the national narrative, then you have a system that can resist populist assaults on democracy and on the collective values that you have. And the issue we have in Africa in general is that the state came before the nation. And so there's a problem of nation building in Africa. Mm-hmm. That's why it's very hard to compare what's going on in America, what's going on in Africa.
Yes.
Because America has a solid ideal of a nation.
Yes, many people do not understand what you mean by state and nation. Could you explain?
The state is simply the institutions that have the monopoly of the exercise of legitimate violence within a territory. So that's the Weberian definition of the state, which is considered as a classical in political science. And so the states are the institutions that can exercise violence legitimately within a territory. The nation is the feeling of togetherness. Mm-hmm. So why, for example, in a country like Cameroon, would spontaneously someone from the extreme north feel that he belongs in a nation with someone who's, for example, Fang from the south of Cameroon, who has closer ethnical ties with someone from another country. So to justify our nationhood, there needs to be a strong narrative. And on that field, there are two positions. There's the idea of the German idea of a nation. The German idea of a nation is one people, one history, one language, one religion. When you look at Africa as a general, that isn't possible as an ideal, because there's a lot of diversity, a lot of differences within nations that are very complicated sociologically and anthropologically. The other ideal is one that's defended by thinkers such as Ernest Renan, which consider that to be a nation, we need to have a common ideal. And it's the ideal that mobilizes energies towards the attainment of nationhood. So the issue is, how do we develop an ideal that is strong enough and in which everybody recognizes themselves?
Now,
and that's what America has done.
Now, I stay with you. You're making very important points there. In Cameroon, hate speech is punishable now. We used to have, we even still may have some statements like "Allez chez vous." It is said that if you say it and you are identified, you'll be punished in Cameroon. Those some of the things that we can say from what you are saying.
I mean, Mr. Nda, I think that is part of the issue, but that's the extreme. That's the last thing. The last things we should think about. The problem, from my perspective, is the core issues. The problem is the core issue.
Yes.
What is the discourse on nationhood in Cameroon? Because there are a lot of historical problems in the history of Cameroon that haven't been dealt with sufficiently.
Yeah.
And as long as all those issues are not dealt with, going at the end, that's the last level, talking about hate speech and the significance that would have. Because hate speech only has significance when it's rooted in deep institutional and historical issues.
Exceptionally, he has raised very important points there. Exceptionally, I'm going to give you 1 minute to go around before we move into the next topic, Eugene.
Yeah, I think, and what he says is quite on point. One of the things I've argued before is that as a country, we have never sat down to create a country. We've jumbled together and we've tried to forge ahead like that with all the discordances in the system. We have never really sat down to ask ourselves, what kind of country do we want to be? Until we get to that point, and which is when things like what he's describing are considered, we're going to struggle. It's going to be a lot tougher and create more divisions if we want to ram ourselves into a unit when the cores of that unit are not willing to stick together.
We are trying to look at the importance in our country, move from America to Cameroon, and we'll move out of this topic. Yes.
I think one thing that happened, that is an outcome of what happened in America, is the kind of response of the law enforcement. Imagine that at the Capitol, it was the Black Lives Matter movement that went there. Probably the belong wouldn't have been the same, because it's black people. We've seen that in America. It's happening in America. It is not only in America, it's happening elsewhere. We've seen places where young people come out with machetes and are being literally begged by the law enforcement to go back home. And in some places, young people still come out with their empty hands and they are being shot. It's happening. So those are some of the systemic injustices that
culminate
in America and elsewhere that we have to deal with.
Okay.
Like Paul and...
Yes, Gillian, I think in Cameroon, nationhood is really a very difficult thing to swallow, because the system makes some people think the country belongs to them more than others, because it is the way the system has been built. There is clear evidence of discrimination and reject. So it is a very difficult thing to compare.
Thank you. We are building our nation, and as he said, we need to look at some of those things to put together so that we have a stronger nation, in a way that when one person comes up, like it happened in America, the institutions will bring him down and we'll move forward. And with that, we're going to move into the next topic, this transition, and we'll come back to talk climate change and cooperation. welcome back. Now we're talking climate change. Hope for a new international cooperation. We want to say here and now that the President-elect of the United States of America, Joe Biden, has already appointed people. His policy even towards international cooperation is different, it's open, including climate change, and we have an environmental expert here with us. The first thing we're going to ask you is, do we see some hope in the way, especially the international cooperation concerning climate change is going to be moved, given that what happens in America affects the rest of the world?
Yes. Thank you. Now, I think it's very important to state that America has gone through several administrations, and the history of climate change negotiations in America has never been level. Clinton negotiated the Kyoto Protocol, signed it, then Bush administration came in and refused to ratify it. So Kyoto Protocol was not applied in America, and that brought a lot of destruction on the climate regime.
Kyoto Protocol, what was it? Briefly, the contents.
Okay, the Kyoto Protocol is a protocol under the Convention on Climate Change, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which puts the countries of the world in two categories: developed countries, called Annex 1, and then developing countries that have not done a lot of damage to the climate regime. And then the developed countries, the Annex 1 countries, took a commitment to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by a certain time, following a base level.
Okay.
That is very important, because to solve the climate crisis, there is need to reduce greenhouse gas
Thank
emissions.
you. You've explained that you were at the point of saying that Clinton signed, Bush did not ratify.
Yes. And that discouraged many other countries from taking ambitious actions under the Kyoto Protocol. Secondly, Obama negotiated the climate agreement in Paris. Then the Republican regime of Trump came and withdrew from it. So this has put America in a very tight corner, in the sense that it has not only lost its leadership on environmental protection, but also lost respect of the other countries. Now that Biden promised, that was his campaign promise, that he will come back, America will come back on the driving seat in the climate, the Paris Agreement. It is very important. I think he has taken it very seriously, because if you just think of you think of the fact that he appointed
John Kerry, yes,
as a climate envoy with a lot of powers, that is already a good sign. Secondly, I've been told that in all of the congratulatory calls that he has received from the world leaders, each time he talks about climate change, and he also promised that he will, call a climate summit to bring world leaders together to sit down and think of what to do to, to raise the ambition.
So there's
Those
hope.
are some of the good signs.
Okay.
However, this is not to be celebrated.
Why
America coming back into the climate agreement is not something to, to say we have to celebrate. We are happy it has come. They have come back. The point is that they were not where they were supposed to be. If they come back, it's just normal. America now has to prove that they mean business by taking those actions nationally.
Now, how does it affect Cameroon? We'll not leave you with that. I'm going to go to something else. How does that affect Cameroon, given that it's a new kind of hope that we're going to have?
Well, it affects the whole climate regime. And let me say something. Kerry understands the fact that coming back is not enough, but they have to come back with a lot of humility, because when they left, it was a disgrace to his country. So I think by coming back with humility, it means they are more predisposed to listen to others who have been saying, let's do the right thing, because Kerry has promised that. how does that impact Cameroon? By withdrawing from the climate regime or the Paris Agreement, America went away with its money. Its contribution to the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, and all other Global Environment Fund, and all those funds that have to fund climate change action in developing countries. So by coming back, if they come back fully with what it takes,
Yes.
it will impact Cameroon's also.
Okay, Hope, Eugene, you are also an environmental reporter. You are media and development analyst. Any hope in terms of this?
I think the hope ends where Dr. Njamshi has described. And I'm cautiously optimistic if you take America's history with the international climate change negotiations. If you look at all of the ambitions in terms of actions from Kyoto Protocol, even going back to Copenhagen that collapsed, you find that the international community has systematically tried to reduce ambitions just to accommodate the United States. And so America has been a more disruptive force, even
disruptive, you see?
Yes, yes. Even in times when you had progressive thinkers like Obama, Clinton, and now Joe Biden. And I'm going to expect that to continue. Biden is going to have a very tough time back at home in getting some of his international commitments go through, because there are certain issues, like we've pointed out, that he doesn't have the power. Now, the politics...
How doesn't he have power when he controls Senate and Congress?
Let's wait and see how it goes. There are a lot of things. There's a lot of lobbies. There are a lot of groups that are working in the shadows that will shape his policy once he comes to power. We can only measure what is able to do when he has been in power. Now it's campaign language. Let's wait until he has powers in his hands and is able to exercise. The last thing I wanted to say was that the politics of climate change is closely linked to the politics of energy. And that's going to be very significant, especially in the United States. The positions that I don't want to use the language of skeptics, because I don't think they're really skeptics. There are people who are simply unwilling to give up certain positions, has clearly been driven by the energy sector. And it's a very powerful sector.
Energy, emission?
Energy in terms of oil and gas, particularly. Fossil fuels, generally, are driving the debate in America more than anything else.
Okay. You wanted to react before I go to Paul Yumbo.
I think Biden, you just asked why will he have difficulties when he Senate
and yes.
It is like Eugene said, the power of the lobbies is still very high. But between now and 2022, Biden has no excuse not to take ambitious action, both locally and internationally. He has the executive power.
Yes.
He's possibly going to have the legislative powers, which is what has been lacking in the previous Democratic administrations. They take a decision down there, when it goes to the Senate, it is blocked.
Yeah, the bipartisan system is in his favor completely.
The bipartisan system
is in his favor.
And we even hear some Republicans saying they should take bipartisan legislation on climate change this period.
Okay.
So that is where we have hope. He has no excuse not to do something within his first 2 years.
Yes, Paul?
Well, the international regime on climate change has known a lot of mutations that have been described in the previous discussions. Since Rio 92, there is an international consensus on the fact that there's a need to fight against climate change. And the baseline level is pre-industrial levels, 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. That's the objective. So the main issue with the Paris Peace Agreement right now is, how do we distribute the right to pollute amongst countries of the world? And historically, the debate on climate change has been a north-south debate. A north-south debate where southern countries were saying, okay, didn't partake in pollution, so we can't be held responsible for the effects of the pollution of the Western world. And the Western countries, which have developed thanks to pollution, polluting a lot, have been in a very tight position where they have a need for pollution to continue their development and the industrial activities of the Western world, but they have a historical responsibility towards the rest of the planet. And so generally the discourse has been a discourse in partial equilibrium, the discourse of the Copenhagen Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol.
Yes.
And so right now the issue is, with the new American impetus, what direction will President Biden steer these international debates towards? We know that the fact that America has been absent has made the French president to try and create another multilateral pole of power with his Paris Peace Forum. He has received international NGOs, individual powerful actors, and he's been trying to constitute another hegemonic pole, which hasn't had a lot of success. So we'll have to listen to what Biden has to say for the first couple months, and then we'll maybe see to which direction he wants to pull the international environment regime.
Yes, Elias, Hope?
Yes, I think there's a lot of rhetorics around this commitment of reducing gas emissions by the different. Every year, these countries they meet in their COP conferences, and they make ambitious commitments, and to a large extent, this commitment end in paper. Take Germany, for example. It's one of the largest producers of coal, and coal is a very big polluter, but their economy is based on that.
I hear Germany is going more for green.
They take these commitments sometimes just to play to the gallery. In practice, little change. So whether it is Trump or Biden, it is more of what we see on the ground, the action that they take on the ground, than what is put on paper.
Let's talk about Germany. I think that Germany is an example they're giving for going more for green.
I think Germany, like you say, rightly say, Germany is championing green energy, not only in Germany but also exporting that throughout the world. I think on that point, Germany has been a very coal-dependent power, but they are, extracting themselves from it by showing the example. They are not only encouraging renewable energy in Germany itself, but they are also trying to, in the international cooperation, that I think that is one of the key things that they are exporting to other countries.
Thank you.
Encouraging renewable energy.
Thank you. Eugene, you've been talking about emission of gas. It centers more around that. We have China is the most polluter, US comes, India, Russia, and Japan. We call these four. Why are some countries more affected, more vulnerable than others?
Well, the thing about with climate change is that it has to do, if you understand the little science, why we now say there is climate change, has to do with the idea that we're pumping in more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere than are needed to keep the surface of the earth warm enough. So what happens is when you do emissions, say in India, in China, the warming effect is global, it's not local. So the causes of climate change can be local in terms of emissions, but the consequence of climate change is global. So emissions from industrialized countries produce extreme weather events in Africa, where we do not contribute as much. In fact, a country like Cameroon is a net minus emitter, in that if you take how much emissions we produce and how much we are able to sequestrate, somebody should be paying us money for playing this very important role
to help the rest of the world.
So that's in terms of how the effects of climate change are distributed, this unequal distribution. But also, to respond now to climate change requires a lot of resources. There are certain vulnerabilities, and coming to your question now, that are inherent in existing problems like poverty, like inequalities, like the lack of resources, the lack of technology, and so on and so forth. which therefore means that countries in Africa and other developing countries, even if everyone feels the effect of climate change, would be unable to respond to it as quickly as countries of the north. That's the first thing. The second level is that they are also not able to quickly recover from any impacts. So take, for example, a flood that wipes out a coastal village, say in Cameroon. That village may never be rebuilt. But after the tornadoes and all of the big storms we have seen in the United States, a month after, the cities are back and they're running because they're more resilient and they're able to recover.
That is correct. I stay with you. You've been talking about the tornadoes, the floods, and the rest, and we are experiencing them in Cameroon, and they are linked to climate change. How do we come to terms with the fact that the global warming increasing, there's rise more in temperature, but we have floods, we have more of floods. How do you, and rainfall, how do you explain that? Common sense tells us that if
you need to, the climate system is actually governed by an energy balance. So the Earth is kept at a certain temperature so that life can exist on Earth. And it's these greenhouse gases that we're mentioning that keeps that equilibrium. When you change that equilibrium, for example, by increasing the capacity of the atmosphere to hold heat, you set in motion a lot of disruptions across the climate system. And one of them would be stronger winds, for example. Another one would be with warmer conditions, you have more water leaving the surface of the Earth, accumulating in the atmosphere and falling back as rain. And that's why it's projected that in Cameroon, for example, the coastal parts of Cameroon are going to see a tremendous increase not only in the frequency but in the volume of rainfall. That is why you would find that in places like northern Cameroon, which are arid or semi-arid in nature, are going to see these bursts of heavy rainfall.
Yes,
that would come for a couple of days, but it would be rainfall that should have been distributed over the year, for example. And so we're going to begin to see that the climate system and weather events are going to be getting more and more towards the extreme. The rains are heavier, the droughts periods are longer, the temperatures are higher, with serious problems of heat waves.
Yes, thank you. From here we're going to talk on how to protect ourselves, the environment, and make sure that we fight against this climate change. But before we go there, Dr. Njamshi, there is this phenomenon that I have read, I've come across, I've listened. It's said that the preservation of biodiversity has something to do, which for the moment is affecting us negatively in terms of the viruses that we have. We've had Ebola, we've had SARS, we have bird flu, and today we have COVID. That it's said that most of this comes from the way we handle biodiversity, including animals from the wild.
I think
you explain this?
Man has, done a lot of damage on the environment to such an extent that there is no balance. If man has gone into the forest, cut everything down, and the animals are out of the forest, what do you expect? So there are some of these viruses that scientists say are harbored in the animals, which are not expressive until when they are out of their natural environment, or when there is unnecessary interaction between mankind and the animals. Those are some of the things that we are talking about. If the biodiversity is not only useful for man, but it's also for animals and every other living species on Earth. So when we tilt the balance unnecessarily, then there is there is some kind of mutation that we cannot manage. Those are some of the things. You talked about, let me come back to this point. Why are some countries much more vulnerable? It is scientifically based. If you look at the fifth assessment report of the IPCC, it states very clearly that Africa is predisposed to warm 1.5 times more than the global mean temperature, which means if the global mean temperature is pegged at 2 degrees, as Yombo said, then we'll be having about 3.5 degrees in Africa. That means a lot of money that is needed for adaptation. And if we're at 3.5 degrees temperature in Africa, we'll be needing something between $30 to $40 billion per annum.
Just for
adaptation, not mitigation.
The most recent estimate is 70 billion even.
70 billion after 2030, if nothing is done, if we are going the business as usual. So those are some of the things that are scientifically based. So when we go out there and cry that Africa is the most impacted, it is not based on emotions, it is based on science. Science of IPCC, which is the scientific body of the convention.
Now, we don't have much time left. I begin with you. What should we do to get out, to actually fight climate change? Apply it to the case of Cameroon.
We talked about, Yombo talked about the carbon budget. Do we still have to, claim our right to pollute? Pollution, of course, there is a way of developing without polluting.
With all the industries that we have?
We should take that opportunity. Instead of changing an old house, refurbishing an old house like developed countries did, because they developed using the fossil energy. We now have an opportunity of renewable energy, which is becoming more performant, cheaper to use.
Okay.
We should take that opportunity. If we're asking for support from the international community, it should be for us to build our institutions, our technology based on renewable energy, which we have the resources, we have the capital to do that. Let's debate on that one. Let's not take that cheap argument of fossil lobbies who say, well, fossil energy is more, is cheaper, is more affordable.
We've got you.
Let me finish on this point. If you look at the development, a study has been carried out, and most energy schemes of Africa between now and 2030 are still based on fossil fuels. 60% of them. This is not where we should go. Okay. We have the opportunity to develop in a different way. Let's use that as an opportunity.
We got you, Elias.
Yes, Killian, Africa has the advantage of having the second largest forest spans, the Congo Basin, coming after Amazon in South America. So, since forest is a strong absorber of this carbon, it is continuous reforestation, preserving this natural forest that we have, that will help abate the effects of climate change. But to be able to do that, the African countries need to make money out of it, out of the carbon stock that they need to make money out of it.
Yeah, we got you. Eugene, we are moving out of the program. He's talking about reforestation. I find that so much in the northern parts of the country, especially 3 northern regions. And also, you're not using the fossil fuel, using improved stoves that do not use, that are green.
Yeah, I think the transition to the low carbon pathway would also include energy efficiency. That is not only using cleaner sources and forms of energy, but making sure that we are using those energies more efficiently, in that we require very little energy input to produce maximum output. But there is also another advantage, which I think African countries need to embrace really quickly, is the idea that most of the investments that are happening now are likely going to be obsolete really quickly, given the global trend towards renewable energy. We've just heard the direction in which countries like Germany are going.
Yes, green.
Which therefore means
going green. We don't have up to 1 minute.
What I've said will make sense.
Yes, go ahead.
Which therefore means that all of the assets that we could accumulate now will become stranded in a few years.
Thank you.
So we have an economic interest in investing in renewable energy.
Okay, you made a point. We got it, Paul.
Well, if I could just raise one point, it would be to say that it's crucial that the global partnership to fight against climate change be reinforced. Because we're all in this together. We need to realize that if certain parts of the world, like Africa, are more exposed, consequences of climate change on Africa will necessarily have an impact on the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. That was Yombo Paul, international relations researcher, Eugene Fongwa, who is the media and development analyst. I have here Dr. Augustine Njamshi, who is an environmental expert, and to the extreme left I have Elias Ngalambe, who is the publisher of Echo Outlook. Thank you very much for your attention. If you didn't watch this program from the beginning, you can catch up at your convenience if you connect to CRTV web Facebook, or you just watch CRTV tomorrow by 2:33 p.m. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a good day.
Championnat d'Afrique des Nations de football. Des millions d'entre nous se donnent rendez-vous sur CRTV Sports and Entertainment pour 22 jours de compétition, 32 matchs. Tous les jours, faites un tour express pour ne rien manquer du show. L'aventure, c'est du 16 janvier au 7 février 2021 sur CRTV Sports and Entertainment. Venez